Okay, let's get started with today's class. Let me know if you have any questions. So what we did yesterday was we looked at how to write basic programs with PL/SQL. So while doing that, we learned some if conditions and loops and stuff like that. What I want to show you is so far we know that null stands for a unknown value. But in PLSQL, we can use nulls for, like, say, when you don't want to write code or you just want to create a placeholder kind of thing. So let me show you something. Let's write a declare. Let's write a small program. Declare. Let's say, for example, n is a number. N is a number assigned to 10, and let's say begin. And as I said, it will have an end if you have a begin. So let's say, for example, if n is equal to 10, okay, then you have to write then else and if, okay. So you also remember we have to do a set server output on to see any DBMS output messages. Also notice this equal to sign here with the assignment sign here, okay. So what we'll do is, let's say, for example, if we know that it is equal to 10, so let's just do DBMS output. So DBMS underscore output, hold on one second. DBMS underscore output dot put underscore line and say something equal to 10. Okay. And let's say, for example, else condition, we don't want to write anything right now. We just want to create that else condition, but we don't want to put any code in there. So all you can do is just simply null. And this is just a placeholder. Basically, it will not do anything, but just, you cannot leave this way. Let's say, for example, if you run this, you will see that it will throw an error because it is expecting something to go in between else and end if. So we can use null just to keep it as a placeholder for now. I don't want to write any code, so I'll just keep null here. And when I run this, you can see program successfully executed. And also we got the result as 10. Okay. So null as a statement is what I was introducing here. Is you don't have to write code, but if you don't want to write something, you cannot leave it blank. So you have to put like a null as a statement. Okay. So here we are just using null as a placeholder. So we might be able to write that else condition later on. Okay. So far what we did is we did some basic programming where we tried to do some PLSQL program level manipulations with the data. Like, say, we didn't touch the database yet, meaning we did not read the employee table or something like that to display the results output. Okay. So now let's do this as, let's say, for example, we'll just leave it as n or d. Let's say d is a number and it is assigned to 10. And in the code, what we'll do is we'll try to get the results from, let's look at the department table. Select star from DPD, and you will see that there is a, sorry, I'm not going to run this as a script. Instead, I have to run it as a single command. Okay. Now something is wrong because it's thinking this is whole thing as PLSQL. So I will put a, how do I separate this? Let's open another window basically. How do I open another window? Let me just do a, there was a open SQL worksheet. Yeah. Okay. So for this, okay, for in this window we are going to continue to write our PLSQL code. But here what I'll do is I'll just run this so we can see the department table output. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to let's say for example from the department table we want to get a record to display it in our PLSQL program. Okay. So let's say department number is 30. What we want to do is we'll say select star from DPT where department number equal to D. D is already declared here like this variable. So we'll just run this to see the output. Now this might give us error. Okay, what happens is you cannot directly write this select star from and display it on screen. Basically, you have to capture the output coming from that select statement, keep it in a temporary variable, and then display the output. Okay. So now let us figure out what columns we want to bring back. Is the department number, I mean department name, D name, or DPT name. I don't know what is the column name. Let's go look at that. D name. D name is the column name and location. Those are the two things you need to display. D name and location. These are the two columns. But what we have to do is we want to actually store that in the temporary memory variables and then display. So first of all, let me describe DPT table and see what is the description of the table. So you can see here dname and location are of character data type. Okay. So what I will do, copy this from the description, paste it here. Let's say for example, DN is going to store our department name, and I'm going to not assign any value, just end it there. And DL, so let me just put everything in lowercase so that way we don't have any confusion later on. And this is of character 13. Okay, so I declared two variables here, DN and DL. And what we have to do is here I have to specify into variable into DN comma DL. Okay. So now what will happen is the variables will, this particular values will be stored in the temporary variables and then we'll be able to display them. So let me run this. I have actually, hold on one second. I have not. Okay, so it is successfully executed. I'm not displaying anything back, but let me also write the display statement. So that way, we can get that output. So let's say dbms underscore output dot put underscore line. Okay, and let's write this thing called department name is, okay, we'll hold on one second. We will concatenate this with dname or dn, that is the variable, and then we'll concatenate it with, and it is located in, okay, and then concatenate it with dl. Okay, and let's say concatenate it with the dot to end the sentence. Okay, now if we run this, what we'll see is output wise, we'll see the department name is sales and it is located in Chicago dot. Now you see how this extra space has been generated. That is because of the data type, character data type. Okay, so what we can do is we can just trim while getting the data out, we can trim the spaces by removing spaces on both sides. And what will happen is if we trim them, oh, so this will not help because even after trimming, they will be going into the character data type. So we'll just trim them before displaying the data. So here we'll say trim, and also for DL we'll write trim. Trim will remove spaces from both sides, left and right. And then when we run this output, you can see here now it looks much better. And you can do a lot of other things, like say for example, you don't want to show sales in uppercase, like whatever data is coming in, like you, whatever functions you learned, like say for example, now we can do this init cap, okay, for sales department name. And then when we run it, you can see sales become init cap here. And then Chicago, I left it as uppercase, whatever is coming back, I'm displaying it. Okay. So this is a very simple program where we are bringing some data from the database and displaying it on the screen. Okay. Now you can keep changing this department number. Let's say if we change it to 10 and rerun this. So let me rerun this particular output, and you can see this is accounting and it is in New York. So this is how you can interact with the database by just passing some variables, and you are able to query the database, bring those results back and store it in the temporary variables, like using this into clause. Now this into variables is specifically for PL SQL. This is not a valid syntax inside SQL. Okay. This is only valid inside PL SQL. And then you're able to display the output, whatever you captured from the database. Okay. Now, what if you want to, say, for example, you want to write some data into a table? Let's say, let's first look at what tables we have. So I just want to create a new table if we don't have the proper tables. So let's say, for example, if we run this, you know what I'll do? I will, okay, I will create a new table. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll create a new table. Let's create a table called create table. Okay. Program data. Okay. And what we'll do is here, serial number is a number, and also we will get a date. Let's say, for example, data underscore date. Okay, is a date column. So there are two columns basically. What we'll do is run this. Okay, by creating this table, we created a program data table. Okay, and we don't have any data here. Select star from program data, and you can see that we don't have any data in here. Okay, so it's an empty table right now. Now, what we did is there are two columns in here. What we'll do is in the PL SQL, okay, I'm not going to declare anything. We learned some stuff yesterday. Okay, so first of all, what we learned is we can have a declare okay section. I'm not declaring any variables right now, but as we go, we'll do that. Okay, we learned for loop. For I in, let's say, for example, I'll start with 1001 and go up to 1000, let's say 1010. Okay, so 10 rows. I will say loop. Okay, now end loop, right? So this is the data I'm going to create data for the table. Okay, now insert into program data, and it has two columns, SNO serial number and the data underscore date. These are the columns we are going to insert data for. We'll say values. Okay. So first of all, serial number, I can just say I. I is nothing but this for loop is running on I. I'm going to insert that. And also at the same time, I will say sysdate plus I. Okay. Sysdate will give us the current date, and then I'm adding whatever I value is as number of days. Okay. Then it is going to insert data by generating all this. Okay. So now what we want to know is we want to know how many rows are being inserted. Okay. So let's say, for example, number of rows is a number data type, okay, and it is assigned as 0. Sorry, assigned to 0. That means initially it is 0 rows, okay. So then what we'll do is with every row entry here, we'll increase it to by doing an increment +1, okay. And then at the end, what we'll do is dbms underscore output dot put underscore line, okay. We'll say inserted, okay, inserted to char. Remember, it can do the conversion, but I will do it manually to char. And I will say number of rows, right? How many rows got inserted? So then end this dbms output and then close it, right? So now this is going to do several things inside. What it is going to do is, first of all, it is going to run this loop, which we learned yesterday. Then it is going to insert generated data into the table. And then it is also going to keep count of how many rows are being inserted. And then it will finally print number of rows inserted message. And then obviously your data gets populated into the table, right? So now we are learning we saw how to get the data by using select, but now we are generating data for a table. So you're learning how to insert data. So when I run this script, it runs and says inserted 10 rows. Okay. Now here, if you see, if you look at the data now, so if you run this command, you can see that there are 10 rows inserted. And then this is going somewhere into November 2018 date. Okay. So this is all looking good. Now, what if you run this command again? Okay. I mean, run this program again. So it is going to insert another 10 rows, but it is a duplicate data. Okay. So if you run this select again, what it is doing is it is inserting exactly same numbers because we hard coded the start and end values. Okay. So what if we want to automate this whole process? We want to say every time I run this, it has to insert new values, not the same values again. Okay. So in that case, we have to know where to start and how much to go and all that stuff. Okay. Now what we'll do here, we'll just delete all this data. Okay. Truncate table program data, and then we'll try to come up with a logic to basically have this data populated automatically. Let's look at the data. We don't have any data. Okay. So here, also remember we learned about something called commit when we finish our program. So let's do the commit here. Okay. Or maybe almost to the end, we'll do commit like before ending the PL SQL program. Okay. So now what I'll do is, let me extend this example to read from table and then do some manipulations and then put the data back and all that stuff. So number of rows will be starting at 0 always, right? Now start underscore value is a number. Okay. And let's say this is assigned to, this is not assigned to anything. We have to figure out what is the start value. Okay. Now generate rows is a number, and we'll assign it to, let's say, generate 10 rows or 5 rows, let's say. Generate 5 rows. And you can manipulate this later on. Okay. Then what else we need to know is, I think that's it we need to know right now. So what we'll do is, first of all, we'll say, how do we find out what is the maximum value available, maximum serial number available in the table. Okay. So let's say, for example, we are now going to do select, okay, max of SNO from table, okay, this table, right? And then we'll put this value into start value. Okay. Start value will be +1. Okay. So into this value. Now, if at all, if, okay, So let's see how, hold on. First of all, before we write this, what we want to do is we want to see if we are getting any value back. I'm going to show you how to do commenting. Now, if you want to write a single line comment, comment can go here. Okay. But if you want to write a multi-line comment, so let's say, for example, if I don't want to run this loop right now, what I will do is I'll put it in a slash star and also end the comment by doing this. That means whatever is inside this comments right now, when I run this PLSQL code, it will ignore this because this is a commented lines and it is not going to run that code. Okay. So first of all, what I want to do here is I want to know what came back as a max value. Okay. So I will just write here and then 0. And then I want to just print what is the start value. Let me see here. This is the start value. I want to just print the start value just to see what is the start value coming from the table. Okay. So when I clear this screen and run it, you can see here nothing came back, meaning the start value is null actually. Now, how do you figure that out is if say, for example, NVL function, we can use NVL function here and say if it is null, then display 0, right? You can do that. So let me run this again. And now you can see that we got 0 as the as the result, meaning why that came is because we don't have any data in the table. There are no rows. So maximum value is null and null plus 1 is still null. So this is returned as null. Okay. So now let's say if it is null, then I want to start a fresh batch. If it is not null, then it will continue with the maximum number. So what we'll do here is if condition. Now we learned about if yesterday. If, okay, we don't even need a if condition here. What we'll do is we'll do a very simple null value function. Okay. Now what we'll do if the assign the start value to NVL of. Now if it is null, then start with 1001. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Now because we already got the value from the table, if that value is null, then replace it with 1001. So start value is now 1001. Okay. Now let's try to print this null value. I mean, try to print this start value just to see. This is called debugging, right? You run the program again, and again to see if your logic works. So now you don't have data in the table, but you're able to return what is the start value. Okay. So that means you're able to make some decisions by getting data from table, and then you're doing some manipulation within PL/SQL. And now we don't need to keep this DBMS output line and also uncomment this thing. So now what we'll do, now this is your start value. Okay. So let's put this here as a start value. Now you know that you're starting at 1001 and go up to how much? 1000 start value plus. You see how many rows you want to generate. You're just writing everything in a programmatic way. So now generate rows is written there. Okay. And everything else is same because what we'll do now onwards, if you want to manipulate, you'll only manipulate the top level declare section. You'll not touch anything else. Okay. So now what we'll do when we run this particular code, let's clean this up. Okay. Run the code and it says it generated 6 rows because what is happening here is it starts with 0. Okay. Now, okay, let me also show you the table data. It actually generated 6 rows. Okay. I want to show you something. What is happening is it starts with 1001. Okay. Now the loop says go up to 1001 plus 5 rows, right? Start value is 1001 plus 5 rows. That means 1006. So that's why it is generating 6 rows. Okay. Now if we started at 1000, then also then it will do 1000 plus 5 will be 1005. But 1000 itself is included in there. Okay. In that case, if you want to generate one less, then you have to do like say generate rows minus 1 like this. some logic to get exactly how many rows you want to generate. Let's say if I run this again, it generates only 5 rows now. But the interesting thing is, if you look at data, what it does is it finds out what is the maximum value, then it continues from there. Okay. So you can see that we are able to generate data now, and it continues to do this. Now it is going in order. So let's say, for example, now I will say generate 50 rows. Okay. So what will happen now is if I run, it starts and goes. And if you look at the data, it generated all the 50 rows. Okay. It went from 1001 to 1061 in this program. And you can see the date also is increasing accordingly. Okay. So now, if you have any questions, let me know. This is a logic where what we are doing is basically programmatically we are reading what is inside the table and then doing some manipulations on top of it. Okay. And also we are inserting data back into the table. So this is basically how you get the data and do some, if you want to do some manipulations, you can do an update. I'm just doing simple insert here. So it is inserting back into the table. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will show you another very important aspect of this programming, PLSQL programming. Okay, let's go back and look at the DPT example we saw earlier. Let's leave this table here. We might use it later, but for now we don't need it. Okay, so look at the DPT table again. And also I want to show you something like describe DPT table. Okay, so let's clear this query result, and also let's clear this output, and let me run this command. So you can see that dname is a character 14 and location is character 13. Okay, so you remember when we do like say Control Z to go back, we will see that program we wrote earlier for the department table. I'm just doing Control Z several times to go back. I mean, it cannot go back beyond this level. Okay, so no problem. I'll write that code again. Okay, so let's say, for example, DNO is number, okay, assigned as 10. And then what I'm doing in this is I'll remove all that and I will say select dname, comma, location into dn, comma, dl from DEPT, where DEPT-NO equal to DNO. Okay, and obviously I have to declare the DN and DL. Okay, so this is a character 14 and this is a character 20, let's say. Okay, and then obviously you can print that output. We don't need a commit because we are not doing any changes. Okay, and here I'm going to just say dn concatenated with dl. Okay, so this is a straightforward code I'm writing, and if I run this, it works. It just prints the accounting and New York as output. Okay, what I want to show is, see how you're putting some data types, and these data types are actually supposed to match the data type in the table. But what happened here is, just as an example, you can see location is only character 13, but whereas I wrote character 20, that means I hard coded a wrong value here. First of all, this is wrong. And also your DBA might decide he wants more space for the location, and also data type should be varchar, not character 13. So he can go back and change the structure of the table. Now, whatever PLSQL programs you wrote, they all have to be updated. They all have to be changed for this data type. Okay, That means somehow you hard coded the values, I mean, hard coded the data types inside the PLSQL program, which is bad. What we should instead do is there is something called percentile type. That's what we should be using. Okay. Now, let me introduce that percentile type and how it look like. So first of all, you know that the department location is based on DPD table location column. Okay. So what you will specify instead of writing this as character 20, what you can do is you say DPD table and location column percentile type. Okay. So now what happens is it will declare automatically, it will look at the DPT table at that time, at whenever time you're running it, it will look at the location column and take whatever the data type is and declare this DL. Okay. So now you know this is the best way of declaring, because now you're not hard coding, but you're saying whenever I run this program, go check what is your table definition and accordingly declare the variable. Okay. So now that you know this portion, let's also declare our department name and department number as similar. So what we'll do here is this is for D name, okay? And this is, instead of telling that it is a number, we'll just say department DPTNO, okay? And also here I should remove this semicolon, but assignment is good because this is happening inside the program. Okay. Now this declaration is coming from table now instead of writing it locally. Now you might not see big difference when you run it. It looks similar, but what is happening is now my code is not hard coding any values, but it is actually dynamically going and getting the type, data type assigned to that column in a specific table and then declaring the data type. Okay. So this is cool. Now I want to show you something. What I want to show you is this is called column level definition, right? You are declaring a column of a specific column type, but there is something called row type. Okay. So what is that useful for is, let's say for example, I have an employee table. Okay. So EMP underscore record is employee table percentile. I will say this is percentile row type. Okay. So this particular EMP rec is now declared as a row type, which means every single column which exists in the employee table, we can go back here and say describe the EMP table. And you can see it has so many columns. All these columns with their data types are defined as a single variable here, and then you will be able to look at the data inside the table. Okay. So let me, what I will do is I will show you example here. So we are declaring a specific row type, and then what we'll do, we'll use it. Okay. So let me leave these definitions here so we can talk about them. We don't have to keep this. What I will do is, let's say select star all columns into employee record. Okay, this emp underscore rec from employee table where empno equal to, we have to figure out one specific employee record. Okay. So let's say, for example, we'll say select star from EMP to see what records exist in the EMP table. And let's say randomly we'll pick one record, 7902. Okay. So employee number is a number, so we don't need single quotes, 7902. Okay. Now we will say we want to print the employee name and his job. We don't want to print anything else. Okay. So now the variable is emp underscore rec. And how do you refer to employee name is by doing ename. Okay. Dot ename will tell that, okay, I want to print this particular column. Emp underscore rec dot job. These are the two things I want to print. Okay. Now let's go back here and check. There is a job column. So we are looking for Ford and list. That is the output we are looking for. So when I run this, you can see what happens is let's clear the screen just to avoid any mix up with the previous output. And now you see the output as Ford and list. What is happening inside is it is actually this particular emprec is going to contain all the columns of the employee table record, and it is dynamically declared, meaning you are not declaring every single data type and the column on your own. So this is much more convenient if you're going to get all the data from the table, and then you're going to say select star from and then put it in this employee record and then display it back. Now while displaying back, you will say employee record dot column name. This is how you will refer. Let's say, for example, if you want to show salary, you will say employee underscore record dot salary sal. Okay. So now if you run this, what will happen is now instead of just showing two columns, now you're showing three columns. So this is how you can actually look at the data. And so this is very important to understand what this percentile type and percentile row type are. So hopefully you're clear about that. Let me know if you have any questions. That is a very useful aspect of the programming, because now you are not hard coding any data types. You are basically dynamically declaring the data type. The columns, whatever are declared inside the table, are declared in your PL SQL program. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is now we want to start looking at some exceptions. Okay, what happens is there are exceptions happening inside. I mean, any program you write, there will be errors. So here, let me get rid of some of these variables which we are not using. Okay, and let's say, for example, here, let's look for some number which might not exist in the table, because it's always a chance that you don't have all the data you're looking for, right? So let me clear the screen and run this program, and then I will explain what happened here. Okay. So first of all, if there is error, you can clearly see that it says error starting at line 3 in command so and so. When it's saying line 3, it is actually telling you that program start here, there is a problem. Okay. There is error. Now, what it is doing here is it is printing your program back, and then it says what happened in the error report. What it says is this is the error code. Okay. So every single error, whether it is a known error or unknown error, it will have some error code like this. And all the Aura dash errors, they're all coming from the database. And then what is the message for that error? So there is an error message. Now here, if you see it, it generally is telling you that there is no data found error. Okay. Now also it is telling you here that this particular error happened, and I don't know because there is no data you're looking for. So you can see here, this is the where clause, and it is always possible that you can have this kind of error. Okay. Now, in this case, what happens is as soon as it sees the error, basically the entire program stops. Imagine you have another 1,000 lines after this, your program stops and crashes. It actually doesn't exit properly. It just crashes with this error. Okay. So how do you handle this error? Now that is, we talked about exception handling, right? So first of all, what you can do is exception is an exception section. You can say exception when, okay, what you will do when some error occurs. Okay. So first let me show you how to handle others, which is a generic handling. Okay. When others, then do something. You have to do something, handling. So let's say, for example, I don't know what is the error occurring. Then I will just say dbms underscore output dot put underscore line. Okay. I'm going to say generic message, which says I will say some error occurred. Okay. And let me just beautify this by putting some, let's say, 3 stars in the beginning and 3 stars at the end, just to show some output. Okay. So the previously what we did was we did not have this exception section, meaning we are not handling any errors. So it was dumping this large PL/SQL error. It is always a good idea to capture your errors and handle them. Now, how do you handle is this, what you're saying here is this is the exception section. I'm going to handle all my errors here. When I don't know what error, so let's say, for example, when any error occurs, which is handled by others, then do something. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll run this code, and now it says program successfully completed. Remember that even though there is error, program successfully completed because you handled the error. Okay. Now that you handled, it is showing you proper message saying some error occurred. I don't know what error, but something occurred. Okay. So in this case, we can print some more things which are helpful. So what you can do is, let's say, for example, first thing you can print is something called SQL code. Okay. SQL code is the error code. SQL code like this is error code, which is the ORA something number. Okay. So let's run this and see what happens. Let me clear this screen again, run, and you can see there is an error code here, error code 100. Okay. In the same way, you can also print something called error message. So let's print something called SQL ERRM. Okay, that's a SQL error message. So now let me clear this screen and run it. And you can see here, now this is SQL code is what is 100 there. And then the error message, what we have here is the no data found error. Okay, this is what the message is. Okay. So basically this is how you can get what error occurred. Okay. Now let me say here, just to beautify, I will say end of error, end of error message. Okay. So this is only displayed when there is error in the code. Okay. So here you can see some error occurred, and this is the error code, and this is the error message, and then you got the end of error message. So this is how you handle your errors. Okay. Now, what we also know is Oracle already provides something called predefined errors, which you can handle. Okay. Predefined errors are like no data found is one of the predefined exception. So what we'll do, I will show you how to write another exception handling. So let's say, for example, when there is an error called no data found with underscores, if this exception happens, then what do you want to do? Let's say, for example, you will say data not found. So here I will say data you are looking for doesn't exist in table. Okay. So here you want to, if you see what is happening here is there is a single quote which started here, and that single quote suddenly ended in between, and then there is no new single quote starting for the rest of the text. So you have to put 2 single quotes here just to make this work. Okay. You cannot have single quote within the data itself. So if you want to avoid errors, you will put the second single quote here. Okay. So what I'm doing in the exception section is, now if at all there is an error called no data found, then print this message. And if there is an error which I don't understand, then print this message. Okay. So now if you run this, it will run in a better way. If it does not contain this data, it is going to give me this error. Okay. Now let's say if it contains data, let me run this again. If it contains data, then the data is displayed. Now let's say, for example, we will get some other error. Let's say some other error is, let's see if we can do employee 4 and run it again. Okay. So the table does not exist. Okay. Now when the table does not exist, this cannot be handled with even others, because there are only number of predefined things you can handle. Some of them you cannot handle. This will completely crash if you do such things. So you have to make sure you have this table. Okay. So now let me show you another example, which basically, now let's clear the screen. And right now our error conditions, they work well. So there is no problem with the data. What I want to show you is, I want to show you another type of error. Okay. So let's say, for example, there is another user called 5654 who is Martin in salesman. 7654. 7654. So what we'll do, we'll say 7654. Okay. So this user, now you know that you have to use in clause if you have multiple rows like this. Now there are two rows which are going to come back. Okay. What I want to show you here is two things. First of all, you cannot retrieve two rows and store in one row storage. This will hold only one row at a time. You cannot store both rows in one place, right? So this is going to give you a weird error called, okay, let me clear this. Okay. And also run the program, and it is going to give you an error called exact fetch returns more than requested number of rows. Okay. Now what we'll do today is, for Notepad, we have to make some notes about these exceptions. So I will say exceptions, Oracle predefined exceptions. Okay. So what are the exceptions we already talked about is no data found. Okay. No data found. So there is a second exception, which is just now we were working with, too many rows. Okay. This is the second exception. So what is happening here is, you're fetching some data, but it is returning more than requested number of rows, meaning I can only handle one row at a time, and you're actually requesting for two rows here. So I cannot handle that in the PLSQL program. For this, you need to do some other logic. We'll talk about them in cursors. But let's say, how do you handle this? When, okay, too many rows is the exception happening here, then you want to do something. Okay. So let's say, for example, I want to print a message saying I can handle only one row at a time. Okay. So something like that. So now I'm handling that message, and when I run this, you can see this, it is clearly telling you I can only handle one row at a time. So let's fix this problem by commenting this out and also removing one other row from the list. Okay. So now it will be able to run, and it will be able to give us some data. Okay. Now what I want to explain here, because of the exception thing, see, for example, if there is no error, then it will go to the end, meaning it will run whatever is in between begin and exception. And then once it is done, it actually jumps to end. It doesn't go through these exceptions because there is no error. If everything was good, no errors, it will skip. Remember one thing here, error occurs, say for example, if you had this statement, here error occurs, and as soon as that error occurs, it jumps into wherever the handling is, let's say too many rows is the error. It goes into this place. It runs that DBMS output, whether it is single output or multiple output like here, and then program actually goes to end. It doesn't go back into the program. So remember that PLSQL, when you have an error, it goes out of the program. It doesn't go back into the program logic. So remember that piece, because all the other programming languages, there might be a way to go back into the program. But in PLSQL, usually it jumps out. There might be a way to go back, but it's not suggested because it will then have inconsistent output. Okay. So we looked at too many rows, no data found. Let me show you. There are. I'm not going to show you, but I'll tell you about two more or three more exceptions. One is called value error exception. Okay, value error, invalid number. Okay, and zero divide error. Okay, so these are three different errors which will occur in case of numbers. So let's say, for example, if you're doing some math in your code, you're doing, say, for example, salary by 0. Okay, or let's say you are saying 45 by 0, because you're dividing any number with a 0, which in general you will write it as like, it's not possible, you cannot divide it by 0. In PLSQL, error you will see is 0 underscore divide error. Okay, this is the exception you will see. So in case of invalid number, this particular thing, let's say for example you say for example a is a number data type, and you assign a with, let's say, string, and if you assign it as 45, then it can be converted to number. But let's say you assign 4a5, this cannot be converted to a number, and it becomes an error called invalid number. Okay. Now, because you cannot convert this particular 4a5 into a number, it says it's an invalid number. You cannot do this. So it will crash with a invalid number exception. Okay. Now, one more thing is called value error. Okay. So here, let me explain what value error is. Say, for example, you declare age as number 2. Okay. But you assign a value of 300, let's say. Okay. So you see this should be only 2-digit number. Age should be only 2-digit number, but you are assigning a 3-digit number here. So that means this is a value error, meaning you are assigning a value which cannot be held in this data type, in this variable. So you will see a value error exception. Obviously, you have to handle them, like say you just handle them like this. And you know, because you cannot anticipate every single type of error, that's why you are going to use this others section. Others will be handling anything which you did not handle earlier, and that's the reason we'll put others at the end of the program. Okay, so you will try to handle all your exceptions, then whatever you thought of. If you're not able to think about everything, it's not possible to know every single error which will occur in your program. So you will write this others exception handling section, where it will handle every single error which you did not handle earlier. Okay. So remember that any exception you cannot have multiple exceptions happening in your program, because at any given time, whatever is the first exception, that's where it will jump into the exception section. Okay. So we talked about uh, how exceptions happen and how do you handle them. So maybe tomorrow, what we should do is we should look at. We know that these are some of the Oracle predefined exceptions. We should look at what are programmer defined exceptions or user defined exceptions. User or programmer defined exceptions. We should look at this tomorrow. Programmer defined exceptions. Okay, we'll talk about this tomorrow. And then obviously now we have a very good understanding about how to use how to write programs to communicate with our database, like bring data back or insert data back into the table, stuff like that. What we'll do is tomorrow we'll talk about user defined exceptions. And then here in this scenario, we wanted to show multiple rows coming from the employee table, which we could not do today. What we'll do tomorrow is there is a concept called cursors, which I will introduce. Let's say you want to get all the rows from the table and display them as output, or you want to do something with them. Like say you want to update the salary of every row coming in and all that stuff. So we'll play with cursors tomorrow, and also user defined data exceptions, or programmer defined exceptions. We'll talk about those things tomorrow. Okay. Any questions? Let me know. Okay. Good night.